Hello, we continue our exploration of the pre-Columbian civilizations of the Americas with a look at some of the prominent societies and artistic developments in Mesoamerica, referring to the present region of southern Mexico and Central America. Like the Andean region of South America, pre-Columbian Mesoamerica was characterized by powerful civilizations that controlled large territories through political administration and military might. We will look at some representative examples of the most prominent civilizations by looking at the art and architecture they produced to demonstrate their religious beliefs, cultural values, and political influence. Settlement in Mesoamerica dates to around 1200 BCE, with the formation of urban centers along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, with the rise of the Olmec people. Before long, the development of other urban populations expanded further south and east with the rise and growth of the Maya societies, then west with the emergence of a mysterious civilization in the city of Teotihuacan, and the arrival of the Aztec near modern-day Mexico City. We begin with one of the most iconic products of the Olmec people, the colossal head. The word Olmec means the rubber people, termed by the Aztecs, and referring to their use of the natural material pulled from rubber trees in the Gulf Coast. We actually have no idea what the Olmec called themselves, since they have not left any written records. However, we do know that they began developing major urban centers in San Lorenzo between 1200 and 900 BCE, before the population center transferred to La Venta, also on the Gulf Coast, between 900 and 400 BCE. In these centers, important architectural monuments were found, which ended up reappearing in different societies and urban centers that followed throughout Mesoamerica: pyramids, altars, temples, and ball courts. Although there are many mysteries regarding the Olmec, they did leave behind some big clues about what was most important to their culture and society. Specifically, these enormous basalt sculptures called the colossal heads have been uncovered at both San Lorenzo and La Venta, numbering 17 in all so far. They are carved from large basalt boulders, a kind of volcanic rock found about 40 miles away from these centers, and are made to resemble the elite rulers of the Olmec people. These are likely portraits of rulers, demonstrating a procession of dynastic lineage. They often bear elements of the jaguar, the most sacred and fearsome animal in their environment, that was often associated with the rulers. It is possible that this colossal head also wears a helmet, as most do, perhaps as part of protective gear worn in battle or during the demanding ball game played among elite athletes. It is thought that only the head is carved because that is where the soul and personality resides in a person. So work done in remembrance of a specific individual would feature the site of their unique character. Considering that the Olmec did not have any metal tools, the degree of naturalism and precision exhibited in this work is a testament to the importance of their leaders and the skill of their craftsmen. Another major mystery in the history of Mesoamerica exists in the massive city of Teotihuacan, just north of modern-day Mexico City. Like the Olmec, the name and language of the people of this site is unknown. However, we know them as Teotihuacanos, given that name by the Aztecs as well. Teotihuacan means city of the gods, since the Aztec believed that this enormous, abandoned city center must have been the sacred birthplace of the gods. It does appear to have been the birthplace of something big, a major metropolitan area with a central sacred space surrounded by modular units of residential apartments. It reached the height of its growth and prosperity in the 6th century CE, but then was systematically destroyed and abandoned, for reasons still debated among historians. This plan offers us a bird's-eye view perspective of the ceremonial center of Teotihuacan. You can see the long Avenue of the Dead, here labeled as Street of the Dead, stretching from one end to the other, with pyramids and temples crowding the sides of the thoroughfare. In ancient Mesoamerica, beginning even with the Olmec and continuing through the Aztec civilizations, concepts of space relied on an understanding of the terrestrial lands we occupy on Earth to be divided into 4 quadrants. And it appears here that Teotihuacan's main avenue bisects the city in a north-south axis, and the enormous Pyramid of the Sun bisects this avenue to create an east-west axis too. At the far end of the Avenue of the Dead is a complex called the Ciudadela, an enclosed fortress-like space that holds a prominent temple, known as the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. We could spend a whole day just talking about the unique buildings along this route, so instead we will focus on one prominent structure, the Pyramid of the Sun. From this angle, we can see the Pyramid of the Moon closest to us, with smaller platforms for rituals and religious offerings. Although it doesn't seem as imposing from far away, the Pyramid of the Sun, further down the Avenue of the Dead, looms large in this landscape. We can see the mountains in the background, and it is believed that the pyramids were designed to mimic the shape of the rising and falling slopes of the mountains around them. Dominating the ceremonial center of Teotihuacan is the Pyramid of the Sun, completed around 200 CE. Beneath this monumental structure is a tunnel leading to a 4-part chamber, likely a place where rituals and offerings took place. Though living humans occupy the terrestrial space of Earth, ancient Mesoamericans believe that the ancestors dwelled in the underworld, and that caves allowed special proximity to these ancestral spirits and thus were sacred places. The Pyramid of the Sun rises 5 levels above ground, reaching nearly 200 feet in the air at its summit. It is likely that religious rituals also took place at an altar space atop the highest level, where people could view the ceremonial proceedings from all parts along the Avenue of the Dead. Above us hovers the world of the gods in the celestial realm, and priests and rulers would climb the many flights of stairs to perform ritual sacrifices and tributes to appease the gods, especially the gods of war and rain. Thus, the Pyramid of the Sun was a spot where all realms of existence were interconnected, from the ancestors and original humans of the underworld to those living in the present, to the invisible gods influencing life on earth from on high. Although we do not know who these people were, it is obvious that monumental pyramids played an important role in their cultural customs and religious practice. At the same time that people of Teotihuacan dominated the valleys and mountainsides of central Mexico, the Maya dominated the jungle heartlands of southern Mexico and Central America. The Maya were connected through religious beliefs, social customs, artistic styles, and language, but there were several competing city-states that made up the larger civilization. Unlike the Olmec and Teotihuacanos, the Maya left behind a treasure trove of written records in the form of glyphs, symbolic forms of writing that blend logographic and pictographic forms. The Maya developed a complex language of signs that resembled and represented real objects and things in the world, such as plants, animals, and the human anatomy, but they also used abstract symbols to represent syllables and sounds, with numerous substitutions available. They created intricately designed books made of pages from tree fibers and inks from local minerals, carved large stone slabs called stelae that bore images of rulers and mythological visions, and created large stone structures demonstrating political power and religious devotion. One of the most prominent examples of Maya architecture is the stepped pyramid temple created from countless blocks of stone. These temples often contain several tiers, with a long staircase rising up the middle, leading to a raised platform or enclosed space at the top. This structure is called the Temple of Inscriptions, from Palenque, now in modern Mexico. It was named for the walls of carved stone inscriptions inside the temple space at the top, describing one of the most successful kings of the classic Maya era known as Pakal, or Lord Shield. Interestingly, the tomb of Pakal lies all the way down the pyramid, deep inside the temple's core. But the tomb is only accessible by entering a passageway at the very top and descending all the way down through the interior. This suggests that visiting the tomb of Pakal would not be something everyone would be able to do all the time, as the Egyptian citizens were expected to visit the tombs of their pharaohs long after they passed. Instead, perhaps only a priest or descendant of Pakal ever returned to his tomb after he was laid to rest. When archaeologists followed the inner passageway all the way down, they discovered a chamber serving as the tomb of Pakal. A large stone sarcophagus dominated the space, and on top of it was this heavy stone slab covered in intricate imagery. On the left, we see an image of the actual stone lid, and on the right is a black and white artist rendering, so you can see some of the details more clearly. When this lid was removed, archaeologists discovered the body of Pakal adorned in precious green jade necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and a death mask, giving him the luxurious treatment in death we assume he must have had in life. In the center is Pakal himself, folded into a fetal position and being returned to the underworld to join his ancestors. He is being swallowed up by a fearsome, beastly face underneath him, who seems to reach up and grab him with numerous outstretched limbs. All around Pakal are designs and glyphs that communicate information about his identity and his reign, and a decorated tree of life seems to protrude upwards behind him, topped with the sacred Quetzal bird looking down on the scene of Pakal's death and return to the world of his forebears. Who knows how long it would have taken to carve all these details, but we can know that only nobles and kings received this kind of visual attention in stone. Thankfully, the Maya left behind a plethora of visual clues about their religious beliefs, social hierarchies, and political histories, and more scholars each year are able to decipher the intricate designs and messages in the glyphs. We know much more about the Aztec than their predecessors in ancient Mesoamerica, mostly because the Aztec Empire was one of the largest and most powerful political entities in the region when the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century. Though the Spanish priests and conquistadors also encountered the Maya, they destroyed much of the writing and imagery from the Maya books, called codices, in massive bonfires. In contrast, the Spanish priests and conquistadors continued to allow the Aztec to create images that detailed the experiences of daily life in the Aztec world, many of which still survive to this day. The Aztec were a much more aggressive people than the Maya as far as we know, worshipping Huitzilopochtli, their patron god of war above all else. In the Maya cultures, the gods of rain and corn were supreme, and political warfare often consisted of taking captives instead of killing soldiers on the battlefield. That changed with the Aztec, who brought human sacrifice to a new extreme, with sometimes hundreds or thousands of human sacrifices to the gods of war and rain in a single day. The Aztecs started as a nomadic people who were newcomers to the central Mexican valleys, but they gained the favor of neighboring tribes as mercenaries before long, and soon grew in power themselves. They built a beautiful capital city on an island in Lake Texcoco called Tenochtitlan, which is now the site of modern-day Mexico City. Many Aztec remnants are still uncovered in the city today. One such discovery was the enormous statue made of basalt called Coatlicue. The sculpture depicts a gruesome image of the mother of Huitzilopochtli, Coatlicue, which was discovered, then soon reburied in the early 18th century and rediscovered in the late 20th century. She was found near the site of the Templo Mayor, the largest stepped pyramid temple in the capital city. According to Aztec mythology, Coatlicue maintained the temple grounds for the gods, and one day while sweeping the temple floor, she came across a tuft of hummingbird feathers that gathered around her skirt and miraculously impregnated her. When her many children heard of her pregnancy, they plotted to kill her. When they attacked her, a fully grown Huitzilopochtli emerged from her severed head and killed off his siblings. In places where she supposedly had her limbs and head sliced off, the heads of snakes spring forth. Her head is formed by two serpent heads abutted at the nose, their heads in profile creating a wide and terrifying face for the goddess. A necklace of a skull, hearts, and hands hangs down in front of her breasts, and snakes appear intertwined to form her skirt, shoulders, and feet. At over 8 feet tall, she is an imposing, overwhelming presence, commanding the viewer to act with respect and obedience lest he be chosen as the next sacrificial victim. The image of the snake was extremely important to the art of the Aztec. As legend has it, when the Aztec first arrived in central Mexico, they were banished to a barren land inhabited only by vipers and other dangerous wildlife. Yet they survived in this inhospitable land and became killers and eaters of the snakes that others feared so much. Here we have a magical creature, the double-headed serpent, made of thousands of pieces of turquoise and shell on a wooden frame. Supposedly, this object was presented to the Spanish conquistador Hernando Cortés when he arrived in Tenochtitlan, demonstrating the wealth and talent of the Aztec people. Nobles, generals, and the emperor and his family would have had access to the finest cotton garments, jewelry made of precious metals and stones, and headdresses made of elegant and colorful combinations of feathers. Although the snake is an important part of the mythological and religious traditions, as we saw with the figure of Coatlicue, what I find interesting is how the Aztec considered their own history as a people just as important as any mythological origin story. Objects such as this one may have been used for religious worship, but they may just as easily have been used to demonstrate the power and wealth of individuals in Aztec society, celebrating their own rise to the top of the social hierarchy in Mesoamerica from their own determination, in addition to the blessings of the gods. With that being said, it is impossible to avoid discussing the role of religion upon the daily lives and activities and ceremonial events in the Aztec calendar. It is believed that sacrifice had been an important part of religious practice in Mesoamerica since the Olmec, but we have the most evidence of blood sacrifices from the Maya and the Aztec. With the Maya, priests and rulers would pierce themselves to spill blood on strips of paper made from tree bark, then burn the paper and inhale the smoke to provoke a vision of a spirit or ancestor. However, with the Aztec, we know that entire lives were sacrificed. This tradition likely started with their predecessors in the region, perhaps the Teotihuacanos or the Toltecs, but the Aztec took the practice to new degrees. As recorded in the image from one of the Aztec codices, or bound books, seen here, humans were brought to the top of the step pyramids and laid across altar stones, exposing the chest and opening the rib cage and collarbone sections of the upper body. Then a priest would slice open the victim's torso with a sharp obsidian blade, reaching in and pulling out the heart, still beating and pulsing blood. Blood was the life force of humanity, and it was seen as an essential thing to offer up to the gods who had created life to begin with. The corpses of human sacrificial victims were then tossed down the lawn staircases at the front of the temples, reenacting the demise of Coatlicue's daughter after Huitzilopochtli cut her to pieces and threw her dead body down the stairs of the temple. In this image, we obviously see lots of red, signifying the blood spilled, but we also see the fine white cotton garments of the onlookers, possibly nobles or priests themselves, and accents of color in the edges of their garments and in the large feathered headdress propped up at the left side of the tall altar at the top of the temple. The victim's heart hovers near the headdress, demonstrating its powerful energy. It is hard for us to imagine that this type of sacrifice was so commonplace. But if we can believe accounts such as the one depicted here, it must have been one of the most important ways to preserve religious tradition and ensure continued blessings and prosperity. Spanish missionaries were shocked at the bloodshed, and codices by both Aztec artists and Spanish missionaries were commissioned to record the gory details of life in the Aztec city, knowing that the Spanish kings and nobles back home in Europe wouldn't believe the tales of the New World unless they saw it for themselves. To this day, these images can have an arresting effect on any viewer. This concludes our brief look at the arts and architecture of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica.